we're Jen and David from Love Intersections.
And welcome to Hot Pot Talk Season 4. Today's episode is with our guests Lindsey, Elaina, and Erin.
How did it feel cooking and making your food in front of us?
I mean, I was a little stressed, you know. It was like I said, it was my first time like doing it by myself, and I was thinking, I had a lot of like my mom in my head telling, because she was really excited when she heard that we were doing this. So she's like, make sure you do this. You only had a bit of this, and all of that kind of stuff. But no, it was nice. It was good. I think this whole process has just had me thinking a lot about how we're losing recipes, but we also don't have to, and it's and you kind of, I'm proud of myself actually for like kind of taking the plunge to doing it and doing it for the first time on camera, but like, but you know, I felt really good about it, you know, and getting to kind of explain it to people, and I felt really proud to like be able to like do that, because like I think like I was saying it was a lot of just kind of disparate pieces in a way when I was a kid. Not that you didn't see the meal at the end, but I think it was really kind of valuable to get to like think about what it means to me to be able to do this and to know how to do this and where that comes from. So, okay.
Great. Tell us what you got today.
So we're going to make ndole, which is a Cameroonian dish, actually from my tribe in Cameroon, but is understood as, when people ask what is a Cameroonian like dish, typically they will just say ndole overall, so you know, wins for us, I guess. But another thing that you can add to the dish that will be ground in with the peanut, I believe, is crayfish. So I brought some here today. Crayfish is also really good. They're like teeny little shrimp, I guess. Cameroon is kind of understood to be known for them. I mean, I've read this, but you know, like colonizer history, etc. Yeah, but you know, the Portuguese came across this place and they were like, "What is this?" Saw some shrimp in the river and said, "Comoros, Cameroon," obviously, and they kind of went from there. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I was yeah.
Is this like sweet Elaina?
Yeah.
It's like
So funny.
I love that.
Like sweet coconut milk and sweet like rice pudding.
Oh, it's like rice pudding.
So funny.
Wait, what was the question you're answering?
How did it feel to cook?
Oh, okay. It felt really good to cook today. I think that, so about a year ago I started recording like my grandma's recipes, like I filmed her. So actually when I was prepping for the dish, like I actually watched her make it because I have all the video footage of it. But there's so many things, like it really like does die with, all those recipes die with her, especially my dad's mom. Like she like is such a good cook and does things so like particular that I've never heard anyone else do in Indian style cooking. So I think it just was really a reminder to continue to preserve all of that knowledge. Especially because so many of my projects this year were focused on that, and I'm sure like all of you can remember just like that, you know, like you were talking about, or even earlier with Chris, like the lived through knowledge, like knowledge through experience and not through academia is so important. So yeah, it was good. I also felt, you know, proud of myself because I don't cook any Indian food for myself, but then as you think about, this is so random, but I was thinking about this, like when you have a partner, when you have kids, like I take that so for granted that I grew up eating certain dishes, but my kids aren't gonna eat, like where is that preservation on my side, even if it's on my partner's side? Like his mom might know how to cook everything, but also you have to, if you want your kids to experience something, that's really up to you, so it's a huge responsibility. So a lot of things to contemplate like went into it, yeah.
And it's interesting thinking about that too, because I think about, I'm thinking about when you were talking to Chris about we're becoming our future ancestors. I remember having a conversation with my mom about, my cousin was getting married last year, and I was asking her like, asking her about the Chinese rituals that happen
Yeah.
for marriage. So I remember looking at photos and seeing, you know, pictures of my mom's doing the rituals, and I had a conversation with her. I was like, how did you know? Like, your grandma must have known, right? And she was like, no, it was really hard. Like, we actually had to like, in my mind, this was a couple years ago, how I conceptualized my parents were like, they are like the holders of culture.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, of course she was 27 or whatever, trying to figure it out, just like what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
To sort of figure out what to pass on and
Yeah.
how to
Yeah.
do so.
Yeah.
I don't know. I find it like harder to cook like Vietnamese food for other people, just because I think it's always like I'm like, am I doing this justice in a way?
Yeah.
Like, and I think I didn't like really grow up like learning to cook that much from my parents. Like, I think my dad is more of like a solitary cook. Like, he would cook the things and they would be ready, and I would just kind of eat them and like maybe help with like crushing the peanuts or just doing like this sort of like peeling the peanut skins, as I was talking to Lindsey about earlier. And so like I think like when I moved out and like lived by myself, I just kind of like learned how to cook mostly through like random food blogs and websites. And I think like a lot of that was like not really Vietnamese food, but then some of it was like, and then I started gravitating towards that. So I don't know, I feel like I sometimes put like pressure on myself to like do justice to like the Vietnamese food and do it in the like proper way or like whatever else that means. But like obviously it's like, I know like there's like certain Vietnamese dishes that like I've never tried, or like I tried only recently, and my mom's like, yes, this is a thing that I grew up eating, but I just didn't like it, so I never made it for you. And so it's like really interesting, I think, like what gets like passed on in that ways. And I like even when I'm at home, like sometimes we'll just like, you know, like sometimes it'll be like my parents cooking Vietnamese food. Sometimes we'll just go out to like different Vietnamese restaurants, and my mom's like, I really want you to try this, etc. And so I think there's like a really interesting way of like learning about food in that way. And like I think also it makes me think about like the individual versus like collective. Like, I don't know, I think trying to represent a certain culture and food is like ridiculous, impossible task. Yeah. But sometimes it would be like, is this like an individual like family practice? Is it like a trend among like, and so sometimes honestly I would just like Google the things and like look on Wikipedia and be like, this is like a South Vietnamese culture. And I'm also like, it's so weird to like look to like the internet or like external sources to like validate how we come to think about our food.
Oh, totally. Like I hate doing that because I feel like it's wrong, and for me, like not that it is, but I feel like, okay, well I'm Indian, like I have to know how to do that. But my mom never has made Indian food for me, maybe dal or whatever, but we always went to our grandparents' house. Like we never ate Indian food unless it was from them. Like my mom isn't gonna just whip, she'd never make that for me, not because she didn't want to, but because like it's so intergenerational what how our parents, like especially, you know, with, you know, immigration and everything, what is their connection to food is very different from what ours is, completely different. So that also affects all of how, you know, we cook food as well, and how often we do it, I think too. Yeah.
I think also like candidly the cost. Like some of these ingredients for like certain foods and dishes, like it's just so much more expensive out here to be like even cooking it consistently. So like dole is not something that we, I mean, I don't actually know if it's something that people eat all the time, but like here it's typically like a special occasion or when we're like all home kind of dish situation, because you just can't really put the money into making it every day, or you make it in bulk and then like freeze it. Yeah, I think like for me, moving away from home really did like change how I thought about these things as well, because like within the context of home, like you probably, this is the only place I would really be eating it would be at home, and then you leave home and you're like, oh, I don't get to eat this at all now, which was
well, you take for granted the access and the proximity to like all the things, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's a literal gap, you know.
Yeah.
I think like cooking this dish for other people was also like quite a nice part of this experience as well, because it's like Elaina was saying, like it's so different when cooking it for yourself when you kind of growing up cooking it in like a family setting or like in a holiday like with multiple guest setting. And
tell me about that. Tell me about that feeling of.
Yeah, I mean, I know. Gosh, I mean, like when I moved away from home, I moved to the UK, and my family was living in Edmonton, so it was very far, and it took me a long time to even find plantain, which is, I like to think, universal. But and like I think the loneliness that you would kind of feel sometimes of not being able to find things, and then even when you do find some things, not finding your things, because you know the African food store does its best, but it's not going to necessarily get everybody depending on who actually lives there. I don't think I would have done like push myself to make this for myself. I think there is something about getting to do it for other people and to share with other people that I really do value about cooking, like home foods and stuff like that. So,
if your parents were here, or one of your parents, and they ate this food that you made for us, what do you think that your parent would say?
I think my dad would be super happy. Like, he would be so thrilled. I sent it to our family group chat when I made it, and he was so proud, I guess. And then when I told him I wanted to preserve all of his mom's recipes because it's his mom's, so I think that also adds something to it. He was so thrilled because So I think that's good because then another generation can experience it. Yeah.
I think it's funny because I think when I was home recently, at one point, I don't know, it was basically I cooked dinner at certain points for our parents, and they're like, "Wow, you can actually cook." But they obviously knew I could cook because I lived away from home.
Clearly,
but they were just I don't know. But they were like, "Ah, look, you can do it." Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I always get nervous cooking for my parents, even though it's never gone bad. It's always gone well. And they're like, "Ah, look," but I'm always like, "Ah," I don't. It's an interesting reversal of things in a way.
For me, it's a trauma response where I'm like, "Ooh, I don't know if I can cook for my parents because they're gonna be critiquing."
That has really, for me, grown my relationship with my parents because now we actually have quite distinct takes on certain dishes. I'm very heavy on ginger and sesame oil, and my mom is a drop of sesame oil is that's enough, where I'm slathering it on everything. So it's a very clear departure.
Yes. Yes. I think through difference. I think is actually it makes the relationship more. It deepens the relationship.
Yeah.
But doing the same thing but differently.
Yeah.
And now there's a whole new generation. Even look at TikTok, for example. You have we were just even saying because you were saying that you make more Indian food.
Yeah.
And now there's a whole new generation of how we can now they're cooking hacks so we can make it quicker. If you're students, there's you don't have to do it step by step. So it's nice also to see the different takes on everything, and then you can make it more your own. So it's more of communal based now.
It is also about what is being passed on, but now you're connected to other folks.
Yeah.
And the conversation is just so much more global.
Yeah, totally.
Is there a word that emerged from today, cooking today?
I think for me, progress, I think. Because my brown womanhood has been something that didn't always come naturally to me, or something that I really had to suppress. But I never would have thought I would have made that. Not that I would have, but just in the context. So I think it's a lot of progress for me personally. Yeah.
What are words?
No,
Sorry,
you can only pick one.
Yeah.
That's why.
Okay, maybe I'll go with uncertainty because I don't know. I think it's it's interesting. I think for me this process has raised a lot of interesting questions of even thinking about I don't know I ended up falling down this rabbit hole of research into Vietnamese food histories, which also went to the history of Vietnam as and the different ways that tribes were sort of separated and then sort of unified, and then the histories of occupation and colonialism and all these different things that kind of underlie the histories, but also I don't know, I think in the individual sharing of food within families, it's kind of the backdrop of you kind of know vaguely a lot of these things, but I think it's there are things that I haven't really fully dug into that is really interesting and that I'm always interested in learning more about, and I feel I don't know, any approach to representing Vietnamese food, etc. I know we can't do it I don't know, that in itself is a made up thing, but I feel I always am slightly hesitant, but still proceed to do it anyway because obviously it's important in a lot of ways, and so I feel that's maybe where
Yeah, I think I'm it's kind of two words. I think just pleasantly surprised. I think the other thing as well is we actually retain so much of what our parents are doing around us. I think is what this has kind of got me feeling a bit our parents are we do retain a lot of our community and our culture. So I think in the fact that we were all able to do this or put in however much time or extra effort or extra other things have been going on to try and do so I think there is something that I'm really like proud of myself for being able to like actualize this and like have it taste not quite like my mama's. We might take a couple more tries before I serve this, but you know, like it is good. It is ndode. It's what it's all of the things, and I'm just like really like, yeah, like I'm just like pleasantly surprised because I think like I do feel you in terms of sometimes feeling like you're not quite sure that you're doing all of the things to be like to kind of be like part of your culture in the way, especially like in ways that aren't necessarily like predetermined or anticipated by like being out here, you know, like especially when you want to get into like maybe the specifics or like but based on your community and so on and so forth. So yeah, I'm like really proud of myself and pleasantly surprised.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.